Good morning everybody. Today I thought I would talk about something a little bit different. I've sort of done a video similar to this before, which is why I am doing this one today, and that is talking about my experience with my overactive thyroid, hyperthyroidism and Graves' disease. The reason I'm doing this is I did a video a couple years back about how I was living with anemia. I thought I would do a video on that because I did get diagnosed with anemia when I was about 14 years old, and through its to date the best in terms of the most viewed video on my channel, a lot of people almost daily still comment on there asking for advice or different things in terms of they are feeling this, what do I think. Obviously I'm not a medical professional, this is just based on what I've experienced to whether I think like at least to get things checked out. I thought I would do a similar video about my thyroid. I'd like to disclaim here, from what I know, I do not have anemia anymore. I also do not have thyroid problems anymore. So I'll start with how I realised I had something wrong with me, and that's probably the most important part of this video because it was a scary experience and I don't want anyone else to have to go through this because honestly it was one of the worst times of my life. This happened around about, I think it was October 2016 that I started feeling quite funny. I had just moved into a house where I was very nervous. I had a massive falling out with someone I was living with. I didn't want to live with them, but the house had bed bugs, which I don't know to this day if this had any kind of effect. And I was getting bites everywhere. They were making me feel sick, whether that was kind of their bites were making me feel sick or I felt sick because I was like, bed bugs. Could have been either. This is kind of when things started and I was getting really stressed because I didn't want to live there anymore. I wanted to move out. I'd also just started my third year of my degree, so it was a very stressful time, and I was also in a job that I hated. They were giving me like 11-12 hour shifts when I agreed to doing 4-hour shifts, so I was very stressed. I started getting these weird, what I like to call butterflies in my heart. They're basically palpitations, which at the time I didn't know. I'd never had a heart palpitation. I'd never really felt anything in my heart, if that makes sense. And it was making me really worried because I was like, that's my heart, like what's happening? And I would get like breathless. And I ended up calling 111, which in the UK is sort of like the, not quite emergency helpline, but it's like a helpline whether they sort of they'll suggest whether you should go to doctors, A&E, or if you're fine and whatever. I sort of spoke to the lady and she went through loads of questions. I'd been through 111 before when I'd had a cancer scare, whole different story. Don't want to go into that right now. And basically palpitations can be worrying. Obviously, it's your heart. Like, she said, okay, I'll get you an emergency doctor's appointment. So basically sometimes they have like slots where they could just see people very quickly on an emergency, and that was the same day. So I went to the doctors and they sort of checked, they did put the stethoscope on me. I think they checked my temperature, just very basic check. And the woman sat me down, she's like, right, you know, you're in your third year of uni, blah, 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 you're stressed. And these palpitations can happen from like anxiety and stress. So I was like, okay, fine. Like, obviously I deal with anxiety. I've never had palpitations before, but like, fair enough, that makes sense. This carried on for a while and I started to get more and more ill, I suppose. It was a few months later, I can't remember off the top of my head when the next doctor's appointment was, but I did decide to go again because this was not stopping. These palpitations were continuing and I ended up, so by this point in November I ended up moving back home and I paid for that bedbug ridden house for the whole year, which obviously was stressful. I ended up living back home with my mum, and then I would commute to Southampton, which was like 3 hours. So luckily, because Tristan was still living in Southampton, I could stay with him like the night before or the night after, or sort of when I wanted if I had university in the week. When I was at Tristan's, I would go to bed straight after uni at like 5 or 6 or 7. I would be so tired to the point that I was like, I can't do anything, like I can't eat. I just need to sleep, and a lot of the time I wouldn't actually sleep, but I would just need to lie down, be really warm, and I just knew something was up. Then it came to, I think it was April / maybe May time, and this is where things got really scary. So at this point I had had palpitations and I was feeling really tired and just dazed almost. To this day, I don't know what it is, but through my own research, obviously I haven't had, again, a medical professional tell me this, but through my own research, I had what I believe was a thyroid storm. Obviously, I didn't know that I had anything wrong with me at this point. I kind of knew, but no one was telling me that I was. I went to the doctors again. They told me I was stressed. No one was going to do anything because they were just like, you're a uni student, you're stressed. And I had what I think was a thyroid storm, where I had what was called a twinge in my heart. So rather than the quick little butterfly sort of feeling, I would have like a, oh my god, like I would suddenly have to like clench my chest and be like, okay, like it was almost like a sort of surge of pain, which again in your chest is terrifying, and someone that suffers with health anxiety as it was horrible. I remember like Tristan's birthday's in May, and on his birthday I had to stay in on the sofa because I was having so many of these. In fact, yeah, reverting back to the thyroid storm was the day before Tristan's birthday. And what happened was I was sat on the sofa eating, and I had a twinge in my heart. I had like okay, and this happened a couple of times to the point that I thought, am I potentially having a heart attack? Because like I was having these chest pains, and I ended up going really cold. And so I was like, right, Tristan, I'm really sorry, I'm gonna go lie down. And I did, and nothing was helping. I felt really sick, like very sick, like I was going to throw up. And I hadn't been sick since I was, I think, I don't know, like 10. Like I'm never sick. I don't throw up. No matter how ill I am, I'm not really sick. And because I like had this weird temperature thing where I was really cold, but it wasn't cold, like my skin didn't feel cold, but I felt really cold, I decided to go have a shower, and I have very hot showers. And I asked Tristan to sort of sit with me because I didn't feel quite steady. I felt really faint. And so he sort of sat on the toilet while I was showering. I was like, just stay with me, I can't, like, I don't know what's going on. And I went from standing in the shower to sort of like, no, I need to sit down. I would sit down in the shower, even lie down in the shower, it was just a cubicle shower. It wasn't like a bath or anything. And then every time I felt okay, I'd stand up and straight away have to go back down. The shower wasn't helping me. A lot of the time when I'm ill, I find showers and baths are very helpful. They just help me a lot. So I was really surprised that this wasn't helping me. It wasn't making me warmer. It wasn't doing anything. And it got to the point that I started shaking. And I was getting really worried. And, you know, I'd been told twice now that I was stressed. So I wasn't going to do anything. And it now was quite late. I got out the shower, dried myself off, and I got back into bed. And at this point, I think Tristan was going to bed too. And he went, Asia, you're boiling. Like, I can feel the heat coming off of you. And this was a little while after the shower. And I had to then get out of bed, and I sort of got on my hands and knees, and I was urging. I was just like, I'm going to be sick. I never was sick, but I was shaking. I was shaking because I felt cold. But apparently my skin was like burning, and I thought I was going to be sick, and my chest kept going, and honestly I thought I was going to die. But at the same time, because I'd been told by doctors that I was stressed, I didn't want to go to A&E, I didn't want to ring emergency services, I didn't want to ring 111 because I thought they're just going to tell me what I've already been told. I don't want to go to the hospital for something that isn't there, basically. Something that isn't actually a health issue. And I regret that now. I really do. Luckily, I never had another thyroid storm, but that was kind of the final straw. Like, no, something is wrong with me. I tried doing, like, mindfulness and meditation, and to this day, I can't do it because whenever it says focus on your breathing, I'm always scared. Like, I remember through that time, if I breathed, if I, like, took a deep breath in and out, it would make my heart go. And to this day I can't do it because like I breathe in and I get very sort of, I don't feel it, but I get panicky that I'm going to, because it was one, like I've said, it was one of the scariest times of my life. And I don't think Tristan, I don't think anyone that knows this happened to me quite knows how much I was scared for my life, despite the fact that I didn't do anything about it. I mean, I tried. A thyroid storm seemed to match that quite well, how I felt. I might be missing some things out, but I remember looking it up after I found out I was diagnosed and being like, that sounds very similar. Thyroid storms can be fatal. Not to be dramatic, but if it was worse, I could have died. I know that sounds insanely dramatic, and I didn't die, and I'm very grateful I didn't die, but thyroid storms can do that to people if they don't go and get help. And I am just very grateful that I didn't. So that was kind of the last straw. That was in May. When I was at home, I went back to my doctor's, and this doctor again said I was stressed sort of before the thyroid storm happened. And I went back again, I said, I'm sorry, like, no, something is wrong with me. I know I keep coming back, but this has now happened. I don't know what to do. Something isn't okay, and I know that. And they then finally offered me some blood tests and an ECG. An ECG is like a heart thing. You get like little sticky things on your chest, and I was terrified because I hadn't had a blood test since being diagnosed with anemia, and I hated it. It was horrible, but I went for it because I was like, I need to know. This was now in June that I had my tests and I had the ECG, and I was getting my results back a day at a time, so I can't remember how long it took to get them back, but I would ring up and they said, yep, your heart is fine. That was like the biggest like relief for me. It's like, my heart is okay, I'm happy. And then they came back saying my kidneys are fine, my liver's fine, and like at this point everyone around me believed I was fine. My mum was like, nothing's gonna come back, you're fine. Like everyone believed, because the doctor said I was stressed, that I was stressed. So it got to the final day, the final result, and I didn't even know what they were testing for, but they would say things. And at this point I was revising for my maths test that I had to take for my PGCE the next year. I couldn't get on to my teacher training. God forbid if I couldn't get on. If I didn't pass this test, I wouldn't be able to get on the course. So I was revising. Again, I was stressed because I'm not very good at maths. And I got a call and I was like, oh no. Like, I think I just kind of knew at this point. I was like, here it is. And they rang me and they said, like, I remember it so well. I sort of went out the room because Tristan was helping me. I went out the room and they said, we've had your thyroid results back. I didn't know what a thyroid was at this point. Like, I was so naive to what this thing in my neck was. And it produces like your hormones and stuff. And she said, your like results are through the roof. She said, you have a very overactive thyroid. And I was sort of like, what does that mean? And she said, basically, it's pumping out more hormones than it can handle. Have you been experiencing anything to do with your heart? And I said, yes. And she said that it's making your heart go into overdrive. It's making your whole body do everything twice as much and twice as fast, which is why I had the palpitations, which is why I felt so tired, because my body was just working twice as much, basically. And she said, I'm so glad you came to us because, you know, your levels are so high. She said, I'd like to bring you back in for another blood test tomorrow. And I was just like, more bloods. At this point, I am fine with it. I've had it so many times now. And they needed to refer me to the hospital, not like in an emergency, just for treatment. Basically, I had an overactive thyroid, which, like I said, meant everything was going into overdrive. It means you can, like, lose weight. And I was quite thin at this point. Not significantly that different, but like you could notice over the course of the summer having I went on to medication called carbimazole. I had to take 3 of them a day. I had to sort of clock it. They then were still doing tests on me because all they knew was that I had an overactive thyroid. That then came back with the official diagnosis of I had hyperthyroidism and Graves' disease. Hyperthyroidism, I'm just going to read it off this because I don't want to say the wrong thing. Hyperthyroidism occurs when your thyroid gland produces too much of the hormone thyroxine. Hyperthyroidism can accelerate your body's metabolism, causing unintentional weight loss and rapid or irregular heartbeat. So the symptoms you can have is weight loss, rapid heartbeat, irregular heartbeat, pounding of your heart, increased appetite, which I kind of didn't have. I actually had a not very good appetite at all. Worse anxiety than you already have. So like anxiety can be caused by thyroid function a lot of the time. I had anxiety well before I had this, so I think it definitely did increase it. Tremors, sweating, changes in your menstrual pattern, increased sensitivity to heat, changes in your bowel patterns, an enlarged thyroid gland, so that's like here, fatigue, muscle weakness, difficulty sleeping, skin thinning, and fine and brittle hair. And then if you have Graves' disease, sometimes your eyes can like kind of like be really bulgy. Mine didn't, luckily. Like, that was when I found out I had Graves' disease, that was something I was just like, I'm glad I don't have that. So Graves' disease is also known as toxic diffuse goiter, is an autoimmune disease that affects the thyroid. It frequently results in hyperthyroidism. So basically, me having Graves' disease caused this. This can be genetic. This can be, you can get Graves' disease through stress. So maybe that connects. So that's what I was getting treated for. And they said basically they would keep me on the medication, but if it doesn't go within a couple of years, they would have to look at maybe taking my thyroid out, or like a part of it out or something. There's also like radiotherapy, and there's just different ways you can go about it. And it was quite scary, to say the least. Like, anemia was a very common issue. So when I got diagnosed that, it wasn't like that big a deal. I just took some iron tablets and that was cool. This was different because I kind of thought, like, I'm going to have Graves' disease for the rest of my life. I was on my 3-day tablets for, I think, a couple of months. And then they told me that my thyroid had gone the other way, which meant it was underactive, which is a lot more dangerous, I think. And it kind of reverses everything. So my body's not working as much as it should be. I could gain weight, and so they said I then had an underactive thyroid, and then had to still give me the tablets but a lower dose, because obviously my thyroid was still, it would still like slowly build its way back to overactive. They had to keep me on the medication, but I think they went down to 2 and then they went down to 1 when they realised it wasn't going up quick enough. And then eventually, I think it was when I started my PTC, it was around January 2018, I think, they said, stop now, basically. They took me into the hospital and they said the medication has like wonders on it, like, it's fine. And then I had to get tested a couple more times over the next few months to find out that, so it was in January that I found out. So I'd been tested a couple times for that basically I found out that the medication was working, like, really, really well, better than it should. So then in January I went in and I had a meeting with my doctor in the hospital, and she said, so I don't think it was Graves' disease now that I've seen how the medication has interacted with your body, we're going to change the diagnosis to thyrotoxicosis. And thyrotoxicosis, I believe is how it said, is an inflammation of the thyroid, basically, without having an autoimmune disease or any kind of disease, basically. And the reason this happened, they're pretty sure, is basically because I was so anxious and so stressed, it sent my thyroid into overdrive, and that inflamed it, basically. Like, anxiety can do so much to your body, it's horrible. That's what happened. So she said what I would suggest is get tested every couple of months, but by January they were pretty sure that it wasn't going to come back. It hadn't been presently inflamed for a couple of months at this point. She said, but just for like peace of mind, if you want to get checked every couple of months, then that's fine. There's a chance that it will come back, and especially if you're in stressful situations, it will come back. But it might not. I still get tested all the time. I tried a lot of things before I had the original diagnosis. I like took out caffeine, I tried to eat better, I went to the gym, I like tried all of these things thinking maybe it's just my lifestyle, and that maybe that if it's to do with stress and anxiety that it will go away, and none of it helped. I would go to university at 6 in the morning or 7 in the morning most days to do my script, and I would just feel them and I'd be so scared because I'd be like, I need to stay, I need to do work, but I'm really scared right now. So like I said, I just wanted to sort of talk about my personal story with it. If you found it interesting, or if you wanted to watch this because you weren't sure if maybe you had the same thing, or whatever you watched it for, I hope you enjoyed it or found it informative. Please like this video if you did either enjoy it or found it informative or whatever, you know, positive vibes, whatever. And subscribe if you want to see more of my face and more of my videos, and I will see you soon.